Chapter 18. Conclusion. Renunciation is to be practiced not towards work, but to the fruits of work. Arjun said, I desire, O mighty armed Krishna, to know the true nature of renunciation and of relinquishment. O Rishikesh, severally, O Keshinisudan. The Gita insists not on renunciation of action, but on action with renunciation of desire. This is a true sannyas. In this verse, sannyas is used for the renunciation of all works and tyag for the renunciation of the fruits of all works. Not by karma, not by progeny or wealth, but by tyag or relinquishment is a release obtained. The Gita urges that the liberated soul can remain in service even after liberation and is opposed to the view which holds that as all actions springs from ignorance, when wisdom arises, action ceases. The teacher of the Gita considers the view that he who acts is in bondage and he who is free cannot act to be incorrect. The blessed Lord said, the wise understand by renunciation the giving up of works prompted by desire, the abandonment of the fruits of all works. The learned declared is relinquishment. Inertia or non-action is not the ideal. Action without any selfish desire or expectation of gain, performed in the spirit that I am not the doer, I am surrendering myself to the universal self, is the ideal set before us. The Gita does not teach the complete renunciation of works, but the conversion of all works into nishkam karma or desireless action. Shankara, however, contends the tyag as taught here is applicable only to karma yogis, while for jnanis complete abandonment of work is imperative. He holds that knowledge is incompatible with works. Action should be given up as an evil. Save some learned men, others declared that actions of sacrifice, gifts and penance are not to be given up. Hear now from me, O best of the Bharatas, Arjun, the truth about relinquishment. Relinquishment, O best of men, Arjun, has been explained as threefold. Divides relinquishment into relinquishment of fruits, relinquishment of the idea that the self is the agent and so of attachment also, and relinquishment of all idea of agency with the realization that the Lord is the author of all action. Acts of sacrifice, gifts and penance are not to be relinquished but should be performed. For sacrifice, gift and penance are purifiers of the wise, against the view that all action should be abandoned since it leads to bondage. The Gita asserts that sacrifice, gift and penance should not be abandoned, but even these works ought to be performed, giving up attachment and desire for fruits. This, O Parth, Arjun, is my decided and final view. The teacher is decidedly for the practice of karma yoga. Actions are not to set aside, only they have to be done without selfish attachment or expectation of rewards. Salvation is not a matter of outward action or inaction. It is the possession of the impersonal outlook and inner renunciation of ego. Shankara's observation that this does not refer to the devotees of wisdom who renounce all works is not borne out by the text. It is the Brahman from whom the Brahmins wish to know. It is the Brahma whom the Brahmin wish to know by the study of the Vedas and also by means of sacrifice, gift and the austerities performed without attachment. Verily, the renunciation of any duty that ought to be done is not right. The abandonment of it through ignorance is declared to be of the nature of dullness. He who gives up a duty because it is painful or from fear of physical suffering performs only the relinquishment of the passionate kind and does not gain the reward of relinquishment. But he who performs a prescribed duty as a thing that ought to be done, renouncing all attachment and also the fruit, his relinquishment is regarded as one of goodness. What ought to be done is what is in harmony with the cosmic purpose. The wise man who renounces, whose doubts are dispelled, whose nature is of goodness, has no aversion to disagreeable actions and no attachment to agreeable action. It is indeed impossible for any embodied being to abstain from work altogether, but he who gives up the fruit of action, he is said to be the relinquisher. Pleasant, unpleasant, and mixed, threefold is the fruit of action accruing after death. To those who have not relinquished, there is none whatever for those who have renounced. Shankaracharya considers Tyagins to be Karmyogis and Sannyasis to be those who have renounced all work except that which is essential for the maintenance of the body. Work is a function of nature. O mighty armed Arjun, learn of me these 5 factors for the accomplishment of all action as stated in the Sankhya doctrine. Sankhya here means the Vedanta. Kritante is interpreted as the end of the Krita age, that is as taught in the original Sankhya. The seat of action and likewise the agent, the instruments of various sorts, the many kinds of efforts and providence being the 5th. Adhishtha or the seat refers to the physical Adhishthan or the seat refers to the physical body. Karta, agent, he is according to Shankara the phenomenal ego. Upadhi Lakshano Avidya Kalpito Bhokta, the psycho-physical self which mistakes the organism for the true self. For it is the individual self, the Jivatma. For Madhva, it is the Supreme Lord Vishnu. The Karta or the agent is one of the 5 causes of Lord. The Karta or the agent is one of the 5 causes of action. According to the Sankhya doctrine, Parshu or the self is a mere witness. Though strictly speaking the self is a karta or non-doer, still its witnessing starts the activities of Prakriti, and so the self is included among the determining causes. 6th, efforts, function of the vital energy within the body. Devam, providence, represents the non-human factor that interferes and disposes of human effort. It is the wise or seeing will that is at work in the world, in all human actions. There is an unaccountable element which is called luck, destiny, fate, or the force accumulated by the acts of one's past lives. It is called here Deva. The task of man is to drop a pebble into the pond of time, and we may not see the ripple touch the distant shore. We may plant the seed, but we may not see the harvest which lies in hands higher than our own. Dev or the super-personal fate is the general cosmic necessity, the resultant of all that has happened in the past, which rules unnoticed. It works in the individual for its own incalculable purposes. Belief in Deva should not be an excuse for quiescence. Man is a term of transition He is conscious of all his aim to rise from his animal ancestry to the divine ideal. The pressure of nature, heredity and environment can be overcome by the will of man. Whatever action a man undertakes by his body, speech or mind, where it is right or wrong, these five are its factors. Such being the case, the man of perverse mind who, on account of his untrained understanding, looks upon himself as the sole agent, he does not see. The agent is one factor among five, and so he misapprehends the facts that he looks upon the agent as the sole cause. Shankara explains, looks on the pure self as the doer. If he attributes agency to the pure self, he misapprehends the facts. The ego is generally taken to be the doer, but it is only one of the main determinants of human action, which are all the products of nature. When the ego is recognized as such, we are freed from its binding influence, and we live in the greater knowledge of the universal self, and in that self-vision all acts are the products of Prakriti. He who is free from self-sense, whose understanding is not sullied, though he slay these people, he slays not, nor is he bound by his action. The freed man does his work as the instrument of the universal spirit, and for the maintenance of the cosmic order, he performs even terrific deeds without any selfish aim or desire, but because it is the ordained duty. What matters is not the work, but the spirit in which it is done. Though he slays from the worldly standpoint, he does not stay in truth. This passage does not mean that we can commit crime with impunity. He who lives in the large spiritual consciousness will not feel any need to do any wrong. Evil activities spring from ignorance and separatist consciousness, and from consciousness of unity with the Supreme Self, only good can result. Knowledge and action. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knowing subject are the threefold incitement to action. The instrument, the action, the agent are the threefold composite of action. Karma Chodana refers to the mental planning, and Karma Sangraha to the actual execution of the action, and each has three aspects. Knowledge, action and the agents are said in the science of modes to be of three kinds only, according to difference in the modes. Hear thou duty of these also. The Sankhya system is referred to, and it is authoritative in some matters, though not in regard to the highest truth. Three kinds of knowledge. The knowledge by which the one imperishable being is seen in all existence, undivided in the divided. Know that knowledge is of goodness. The knowledge which sees multiplicity of beings in the different creatures by reason of their separateness. Know that the knowledge is of the nature of passion. But that which clings to one single effect as if it were the whole, without concern for the cause, without grasping the real, the narrow, is declared to be of the nature of dullness. Three kinds of work. An action which is obligatory, which is performed without attachment, without love or hate, by one undesirous of fruit, that is said to be of goodness. But that action which is done in great strength by one who seeks to gratify his desires or is impelled by self-sense is said to be of the nature of passion. With great strain, the consciousness of suffering, the sense that we are doing something disagreeable, that we are passing through grim suffering and toil, takes away from the value of the act. To feel consciously that we are doing something great, that we are sacrificing something vital, is a failure of the sacrifice itself. But when the work is undertaken for the cause, it is a labor of love, and sacrifice itself is not felt as a sacrifice. Doing unpleasant things from a sense of duty, feeling the unpleasantness all the time is of the nature of passion, but doing it gladly in utter unconsciousness with a smile on the lips, as Socrates drank hemlock, is of the nature of goodness. It is the difference between an act of love and an act of law, an act of grace and an act of obligation. The action which is undertaken through ignorance without regard to consequences or to loss and injury, and without regard to one's human capacity, that is said to be of dullness. The effects of action or others must always be considered. Only selfish aims are to be renounced. 3 kinds of doer. The doer who is free from attachment. One has no speech of egotism, full of resolution and zeal, and who is unmoved by success or failure. He is said to be of the nature of goodness. The doer who is swayed by passion, who eagerly seeks the fruits of his work, who is greedy, of harmful nature, impure, who is moved by joy and sorrow, he is said to be of passionate nature. The doer who is unbalanced, vulgar, obstinate, deceitful, malicious, indolent, despondent, and procrastinating, he is said to be of the nature of dullness. Quite uncultured in intellect and like a child. 3 kinds of understanding. Here now the threefold distinctions of understanding as also of steadiness, O winner of wealth Arjun, according to the modes to be set forth fully and separately. The understanding which knows action and non-action, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, what is to be feared and what is not to be feared, what binds and what frees the soul, that understanding, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of goodness. That by which one knows is a mistaken way, the right and the wrong, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, that understanding, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of passion. That which enveloped in darkness conceives as right what is wrong and sees all things in a perverted way, contrary to the truth, that understanding, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of dullness. 3 kinds of steadiness. The unwavering steadiness by which, through concentration, who controls the activities of the mind and life, one controls the activities of the mind, the life breeze and the senses, that, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of goodness. Dhriti, steadiness of attention, which makes us aware of much that our ordinary vision is not able to observe. Its power is proportional to our detachment from regrets over the past and anxieties for the future. The steadiness by which one holds fast to duty, pleasure and wealth, desiring the fruit is in consequence thereof, that, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of passion. That steadiness by which a fool does not give up sleep, fear, grief, depression and arrogance, that, O Parth Arjun, is of the nature of dullness. 3 kinds of happiness. And now hear from me, O best of the Bharatas, Arjun, the 3 kinds of happiness, that in which a man comes to rejoice by long practice and in which he reaches the end of his sorrow. That happiness which is like poison at first and like nectar at the end, which springs from a clear understanding of the self, is said to be of the nature of goodness. That happiness which arises from the contact of the senses and their objects, and which is like nectar at first but like poison at the end, such happiness is recorded to be passionate. That happiness which dilutes the soul both at the beginning and at the end, and which arises from sleep, sloth and negligence, that is declared to be of the nature of dullness. Happiness is the universal aim of life, only it is of different kinds according to the modes which dominate our nature. If the tamas predominates in us, we are We are satisfied with violence and inertia, blindness and error. If Rajas prevails, wealth and power, pride and glory give us happiness. True happiness of human beings lies not in the possession of outward things, but in the fulfillment of the higher mind and spirit, in the development of what is most inward in us. It may mean pain and restraint, but it will lead us to joy and freedom. We can pass from the happiness of knowledge and virtue to the eternal calm and joy, anand of the spirit, when we become one with the highest self and one with all beings. Various duties determined by one's nature, swabhav and station, swadharma. There is no creature either on earth or again among the gods in heaven which is free from the three modes born of nature, of Brahmins, of Kshatriya and Vaishyas, also of Shudras. O conqueror of the foe, Arjun, the activities are distinguished in accordance with the qualities born of their nature. The fourfold order is not peculiar to Hindu society. It is of universal application. The classification depends on types of human nature. Each of the four classes has certain well-defined characteristics, though they are not to be regarded as exclusive. These are not determined always by heredity. The Gita cannot be used to support the existing social order with its rigidity and confusion. It takes up the theory of the four orders and enlarges its scope and meaning. Man's outward life must express his inward feeling. The surface must reflect the profundity. Each individual has his inborn nature, swabhav, and to make it effective in his life is his duty, swadharma. Each individual is a focus of the supreme, a fragment of the divine. His destiny is to bring out in his life this divine possibility. The one spirit of the universe has produced the multiplicity of souls in the world, but the idea of the divine is our essential nature, the truth of our being, our swabhav, and not the apparatus of the gunas, which is only the medium for expression. If each individual does what is appropriate to him, if he follows the law of his being, his swadharma, then God would express himself in the free volition of human beings. All that is essential for the world will be done without a conflict, but men rarely do what they ought to do when they undertake to determine events, believing that they know the plan of the whole. They work mischief on earth. So long as our work is done in accordance with our nature, we are righteous, and if we dedicate it to God, our work becomes a means of spiritual perfection. When the divine in the individual is completely manifested, he attains the eternal imperishable status. The problem that human life sets to us is to discover our true self and live according to its truth. Otherwise, we would sin against our nature. The emphasis on swabhav indicates that human beings are to be treated as individuals and not as types. Arjun is told that he who fights gallantly as a warrior becomes mature for the peace of wisdom. There are four broad types of nature, and answering to them are four kinds of social living. The four classes are not determined by birth or color, but by psychological characteristics which fit us for definite functions in society. Serenity, self-control, austerity, purity, forbearance, and uprightness, wisdom, knowledge, and faith in religion. These are the duties of the Brahmin, born to his nature. Those who belong to the order of Brahminhood are expected to possess mental and moral qualities. Not by matted hair, not by lineage, nor by birth is one is Brahmin. He is a Brahmin in whom these are truth and righteousness. Power corrupts and blind insight. Uncontrolled power is fatal to mental poise. So the Brahmins eschew direct power and exercise a general control through persuasion and love and save the wielders of powers from going astray. Heroism, vigor, steadiness, resourcefulness and not fleeing even in a battle, generosity and leadership, these are the duties of a Kshatriya born of his nature. Though the Kshatriyas cannot claim to be spiritual leaders, they have the qualities which enable them to adapt spiritual truths to the requirements of action. Agriculture, tending cattle and trades are the duties of a Vaishya born of his nature. Work of the character of service is the duty of a Shudra born of his nature. It is not a question of identical opportunities for all men to rise to the highest station in social life, for men differ in their powers, but a question of giving equal opportunities for all, so that they may bring their respective gifts to fruition. Each one should have the opportunity of achieving his human fullness, the fruits of wisdom and virtue according to his efforts and condition. It makes little difference whether we dig the earth or do business or govern a state or meditate in a cell. The Varna rules recognize that different men contribute to the general good in different ways by supplying directly urgent wants of which all are conscious, and by seeing in their lives and work witness to truth and beauty. Society is a functional organization, and all functions which are essential for the health of society are to be regarded as socially equal. Individuals of varying capacities are bound together in a living organic social system. Democracy is not an attempt at uniformity, which is impossible, but at an integrated variety. All men are not equal in their capacities, but all men are equally necessary for society, and their contribution from their different stations are of equal value. Devoted each of his own duty, man attains perfection. How one devoted to one's own duty attains perfection, that do thou hear. Devoted each to his own duty. Each of us should be loyal at our levels of our feelings and impulses. It is dangerous to attempt work beyond the level of our nature, our swabha. Within the power of our nature, we must live up fully to our duty. Mr. Gerald Hard on this book on Man the Master, 1940, to emphasize the need for a quadri-type organization of society. He writes, "It would seem then that there have always been present in human community 4 types or strata of consciousness. We have already spoken of the first level. These are the eyes or antenna, the emergent seers and sensitives. Below the eyes are the hands, behind the forebrain are the motor centers. The 2 mental classes below the seers, the upper and lower middle classes, the politician and technician. It is to them that is mainly due our present crisis. The one, by its great advances in administration, in social instruments, has made it possible for the monster states to exist, and so for their unresolved internal stresses to become more acute. The other, by its even greater technical advances in plants, in power machinery, in material instruments, has made our societies hypertrophies, organisms of unbalanced internal structure and mutually deadly. Besides the 2 middle classes already made unstable and disruptive by their becoming individualized, there remains the basic unspecialized, unquestioning class or mass, the coherers. This class is not only capable of faith, it will not hold together, it will not live without it. Mr. Hart reminds us that the Aryan Sanskrit sociological thought, which first defined and named this fourfold structure of society is as much ours as India's. He from whom all beings arise and by whom all this is pervaded, by worshipping Him through the performance of his own duty does man attain perfection. Work is worship of the Supreme, man's homage to the God. The Gita holds that quality and capacity are the basis of functional divisions. Accepting the theory of rebirth, it holds that a man's inborn nature is determined by his own past lives. All forms of perfection do not lie in the same direction. Each one aim of something beyond himself, at self-transcendence, whether he strives after personal perfection or lives for art or works for one's fellows. Better is one's own law through imperfectly carried out than the law of another carried out perfectly. One does not incur sin when one does the duty ordained by one's own nature. It is no use employing our minds in tasks which are alien to our nature. In each of us lies a principle of becoming an idea of divine self-expression. It is our real nature, Swabhav, finding partial expression in our various activities by following its guidance in our thought, aspiration and endeavor. We progressively realize the intention of the Spirit for us. What we call democracy is a way of life which requires us to respect the rights of every human being to be a person, a unique entity. We should never despise any man, for he can do something which others cannot. One should not give up the work suited to one's nature, O son of Kunti Arjun. Though it may be defective, for all enterprises are clouded by defects as fire by smoke. Karma Yoga and absolute perfection. He whose understanding is unattached everywhere, one who has subdued his self and from whom desire has fled, he comes through renunciation to the supreme state transcending all works. The Gita repeats that restraints and freedom from desire are essential to spiritual perfection. Attachment to objects, a sense of ego, are the characteristics of our lower nature. If we are to rise to a knowledge of our true self, self-possessed and self-luminous, we must conquer our lower nature with its ignorance and inertia, its love of worldly possessions, etc. Nishkarma, the state transcending all work. It is not a complete withdrawal from all work. Such a quietus is not possible so long as we live in the body. The Gita insists an inner renunciation, as the ego and nature are akin. The liberated soul becoming Brahman, the pure self described as silent, calm, inactive, acts in the world of Prakriti, knowing that what the latter is. The highest state is here described not positively as entering into the Lord, but negatively as freedom from karma. Freedom from karma. Hear from me in brief, O son of Kunti Arjun, how, having attained perfection, he attains to the Brahman, that supreme consummation of wisdom. Shankara writes, though thus quite self-evident, easily knowable, quite near and forming the very self, Brahman appears to the enlightened, to those whose understanding is carried away by the differentiated phenomena of names and forms created by ignorance, as unknown, difficult to know, very remote, as though we were a separate being. As there is no need of evidence for knowing one's own body, even so there is no need of evidence for knowing the self which is nearer than the body. When we turn away from the outward and train our understanding, it is immediately comprehended. Endowed with the pure understanding, firmly restraining oneself, turning away from sound and other objects of sense, and casting aside attraction and aversion. Dwelling in solitude, eating but little, controlling speech, body and mind, and ever engaged in meditation and concentration and taking refuge in dispassion. Taken as Dvandva, compound meaning meditation on the nature of the self and mental concentration thereon, and casting aside self-sense, force, arrogance, desire, anger, possession, egoless and tranquil in mind, he becomes worthy of becoming one with Brahman. Attar quotes a saying of Ibrahim Adam: 3 ways must be removed from before the pilgrim's hearts are ere the door of happiness is opened to him. First, that should the dominion of both worlds be offered to him as an eternal gift, he should not rejoice, since whoever rejoiced on account of any created thing is still covetous, and the covetous man is debarred from the knowledge of God. The second way is this: that should be possessed the dominion of both worlds, and should it be taken from him, he should not sorrow from his impoverishment, for this is the sign of wrath, and he who is in wrath is tormented. The third is that he should not be beguiled by any praise or favor, for whosoever is so beguiled is of mean spirit, and such a man is veiled. The pilgrim must be high-minded. Brownie, A Literary History of Persia. The highest devotion. Having become one with Brahma, the being tranquil in spirit, he neither grieves nor desires. Regarding all beings as alike, he attains supreme devotion to me. This verse is another indication that for the Gita, disappearance of the individual is in a featureless absolute is not the highest state, but devotion to the Supreme Lord, who combines in himself the immobile and the mobile. Though through devotions he comes to know me, what my measure is, and who I am in truth, then having known me in truth, he forthwith enters into me. The knower, the devotee, becomes one with the Supreme Lord, the perfect person in self-knowledge and self-experience, Gyan. Supreme wisdom and bhakti, supreme devotion have the same goal. To become Brahman is to love God, to know Him fully, and to enter into His being. Application of the teachings to Arjun's case. Being continually all action whatsoever, taking refuge in me, he reaches by my grace the eternal undying abode. It is also the goal of Karma Marga. In these 3 verses, the author indicates that wisdom, devotion and work go together. Only the work is done with the knowledge that nature or Prakriti, in the power of the divine, and the individual is only an instrument of God, with his heart fixed on the eternal and thought His grace. Whatever he does, he dwells eternally within the great abode. Surrendering in thought all action to me, regarding me as the Supreme, and resorting to steadfastness in understanding, do thou fix thy thoughts constantly on me. Be always one with me in heart, will and consciousness. A perfect self-giving to the universal Lord makes Him the spirit of our life. Fixing thy thought on me, thou shalt by my grace cross over all difficulties, but if from self-conceit thou wilt not listen to me, thou shalt perish. Man is free to choose salvation or perdition. If we fondly believe that we can resist the will of the Almighty, we will come to grief, defiance of God in due to self-sense, and it is powerless untimely. If indulging in self-conceit, thou thinkest, I will not fight, when in this thy resolve nature will compel thee. The desire not to fight will not be the expression of his surface nature. His deeper being will lead him to fight. If he casts down his arms for fear of fear of suffering and holds back from the fight, and if the war proceeds without him and he realizes that the consequences of his abstention would be disastrous to humanity, he will be impelled to take up arms by the remorseless pressure of the cosmic spirit. He should try therefore to further and cooperate with the cosmic evolution instead of denying and opposing it. If he does so, he will change from an essentially determined to a determining factor. It is Arjun's lower nature that will cause the confusion and the fall from the greater truth of his being. Now Arjun has seen the truth, and he can act not for selfish ends but as a conscious instrument of the divine. The disciple must put aside all selfish fear and obey his inner light, which will carry him past all dangers and obstacles. God lays down the conditions and it is for us to accept them. We should not waste our strength in fighting against the stream. Most of us are natural men, eager, impulsive and definite about our own little schemes, but we must change. The way in which we can be most useful in by submission to God's choice. Saint Francis de Sales' favorite prayer sum up this spirit of total subordination. Yes, Father, yes, and always yes. For that through delusion thou wishest not to do, O son of Kunti, then thou shalt do even against thy will, fettered by thy own acts, born of thy nature. You will be driven to do it by the compulsive power of your nature. The Lord abides in the hearts of all beings, O Arjun, causing them to turn around by his power as if they were mounted on a machine. The relations of our unborn nature and its faithful compulsion are regulated by the divine, who dwells in our hearts and guides and constrains our development. The power that determines events is not in hardy, a blind, unwilling, unthinking will to which we give the name of fate, destiny, or chance. The spirit that rules the cosmos, the Lord who presides over the evolution of the cosmic plans, is seated also in the heart of every being and will not let him rest. Without thee we cannot live for a moment, as the truth thou does exist eternally within and without. The Supreme is the inmost self of our existence. All life is a movement of the rhythm of his life, and our powers and acts are all derived from him. If in our ignorance we forget this deepest truth, the truth does not alter. If we live consciously in his truth, we will resign all actions to God and escape from our ego. If we do not, even then the truth will prevail. Sooner or later we will yield to the purpose of God, but in the meanwhile there is no compulsion. The Supreme desires our free cooperation when beauty and goodness are born without travail and effortlessly. When we become transparent media for the light of God, he uses us, his work. Flee unto him for shelter with all thy beings, O Bharat. Arjun, by his grace shalt thou obtain supreme peace and eternal abode. Sarva Bhavin, with all thy beings. We must grow conscious of the divine on all the plans of our beings, all the planes of our beings. The love of Radha for Krishna is the symbol of integral love in all planes of being, from the spiritual to the physical. Arjuna is called upon to cooperate with God and do his duty. He must change the whole orientation of his being. He must put himself at the surface of the Supreme. His illusion will then be dispelled. The bond of cause and consequence will be broken, and he will attain shadowless light, perfect harmony and supreme blessedness. Thus has wisdom, more secret than all secrets, been declared to thee by me. Having reflected on it fully, do as thou choosest. reflect on it fully. We must use our intelligence, exercise our discrimination. Do as thou choosest. God is seemingly indifferent, for he leaves the decision to Arjun's choice. His apparent indifference is due to his anxiety that each one of us should get to him to his own free choice. He constrains no one, since free spontaneity is valuable. Man is to be wooed and not coerced into cooperation. He is to be drawn, not driven, persuaded, not compelled. The Supreme does not impose his command. We are free at any moment to reject or accept the divine call. The integral surrender should be made with the fullest consent of the seeker. God does not do the climbing for us, though he is ever ready to help us when we stumble, comfort us when we fall. God is prepared to wait in patience till we return to him. The conflict between the doctrine of human freedom and that of predestination has aroused much discussion in Europe and India. Thomas Aquinas holds that freedom of the will and human efforts play a chief part in the man's salvation. Though the will itself may need the support of God's grace, whereas the predestined must strive after good works and prayers, because through these means predestination is most certainly fulfilled, and therefore predestination can be furthered by creatures, but it cannot be impeded by them. Man has the freedom to refuse the grace offered to him by God. Bonaventura thinks that it is God's intention to offer grace to man, but only those who prepare themselves for its reception by their conduct receive it. For those scholars, since freedom of the will in God's command, even God has no direct influence on man's decision. Man can cooperate with God's grace, but he can also refrain from it. Spiritual leaders act on us not by physical violence, miracle, mongering, or spellbinding. A true teacher does not assume a false responsibility. Even if the pupil takes a wrong turn, he would only counsel but not compel him to turn back. If such a procedure should interfere with his individual freedom of choice, even error is a condition of growth. The teacher encourages the pupil's early step even as the father does the tottering steps of the child. He stretches out a hand to help, but he trips. But he leaves it to the disciple to choose his path and control his steps. Krishna is only the charioteer. He will obey Arjun's direction. He bears no arms. If he influences Arjun, it is through his all-conquering love, which is inexhaustible. Arjun should think for himself and discover for himself. He should not act from simple and blind beliefs acquired from habit or authority. Inarticulated assumptions adopted inevitably and emotionally have led to fanatic bigotries and caused untold human misery. It is therefore important that the mind should seek rational and experiential justification for its beliefs. Arjun must have a sense of real integrity, that his ideas are his own and not those imposed on him by his teacher. Teaching is not indoctrination. Final appeal. Listen again to me, Supreme Word, the most secret of all. Well beloved art thou to me, thou of me, therefore I shall tell thee what is good for thee. Fix thy mind on me. Be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, prostrate thyself before me. So shalt thou come to me, I promise thee truly, and thou art dear to me. The ultimate mystery, the supreme teacher with which the teacher wound up chapter 9 is repeated here. Thou worship, sacrifice and reverence all must be directed to the Lord. We must let ourselves go in a simple, sustained, trustful surrender of oneself to God, open ourselves out to Him in the words of Christian hymn. O love, I give myself to Thee, Thine ever, only Thine to be. God discloses His nature, His graciousness and love and eagerness to take us back to Him. He is waiting, ready to enter and take possession of us, if only we open our hearts to Him. Our spiritual life depends as much on our going to Him as on His coming to us. It is not only our ascent to God, but His descent to man. Look at the words of the poet Tagore. Hast thou not heard His silent steps? He comes, comes, ever comes. The love of God is pressing in our souls, and if we throw ourselves open to His perpetual coming, we will enter our soul, cleanse and redeem our nature, and make us shine like a blazing light. God, who is ever ready to help, is waiting only for our trustful appeal to Him. Abandoning all duties, come to me alone for shelter. Be not grieved, for I shall release thee from all evils. We should willingly yield to His pressure, completely surrender to His will, and take shelter in His love. If we destroy confidence in our own little self and replace it by perfect confidence in God, He will save us. God asks of us total self-giving and gives us in return the power of the Spirit, which changes every situation. Arjun was perturbed by the various duties, ritualistic and ethical, that the war will result in the confusion of castes and indifference to the ancestor, as well in the violation of sacred duties of reverence for the teacher, etc. Krishna tells him not to worry about these laws and uses, but to trust Him and bow to His will. If he consecrates his life, actions, feelings and thoughts and surrenders himself to God, He will guide him through the fight of life, and he needs have no fear. Surrender is the easiest way to self-transcendence. He only is fit to contemplate the divine light, who is the slave to nothing but even to his virtues. Ruzi Bore. If we are to realize our destinies, we must stand naked and guileless before the Supreme. We now and then vainly try to cover ourselves up and hide the truth from the Lord, the way the gopis failed to realize their destinies. We do not even see God as awaits of His touch. When He turn to Him and let Him fill our whole beings, our responsibility ceases. He deals with us and leads us beyond all sorrow. It is an unreserved surrender to the Supreme, who takes up and raises us to our utmost possible perfection. Though the Lord conducts the whole according to the fixed laws and expects us to conform to the law of rights, action based on our nature and station in life, if we take shelter in Him, we transcend all these. A seemingly outer help must come to man, for his soul cannot deliver itself from the trap in which it is caught by his own effort. When we wait on God without words and desire only His taking hold of us, the help comes. He who cares nothing for merits and demerits, even taught by me, who setting aside all duties serves me alone, is the greatest. The followers of far looks upon this verse as the Karma slok of the final verse of the whole book, the reward of following the doctrine. Never is this to be spoken by thee to one who is not austere in life, or who has no devotion in Him, or who is not obedient, or who speaks ill of me. Only those who are disciplined, loving and have a desire to serve are capable of understanding the message. Others may listen to it and abuse it. He who teaches this supreme secret to my devotees, showing the highest devotion to me, shall doubtless come to me. It is the duty of those who are previously initiated to initiate their uninitiated brethren. May the wicked become virtuous, may the virtuous attain tranquility, may the tranquil be freed from wrong, may the freed make others free. There is none among men who does dearer service to me than he, nor shall there be another dearer to me in the world. The great one who have crossed the ocean of samsara and help others to cross are the dearest to God. And he who studies this sacred dialogues of our, by him I would be worshipped through the sacrifice of knowledge, so I hold. And the man who listens to it with faith and without scoffing, even he, being liberated, shall attend to the happy works of the righteous. O Parth Arjun, has this been heard by thee, with thy thought fixed to one point, O winner of wealth Arjun? Has thy distraction of thought caused by ignorance been dispelled? Conclusion. Arjun said, destroyed in my delusion and recognition has been gained by me. Through thy grace, O Achyut Krishna, I stand firm with my doubts dispelled. I shall act according to thy word. Arjun turns to his appointed action, not with an egoistic mind, but with self-knowledge. His illusions are destroyed, his doubts are dispelled. The chosen instrument of God takes up the duty set to it by the Lord of the world. He will never know. He will now know, do God's binding. He realized that He made us for His ends, not our own freedom to choose rightly depends on moral training. Through sheer goodness, we rise up to a liberty of spirit which carries us out of the goodness to which the flesh is prone. Arjun had the onset of temptation and won his way to a liberating victory. He feels that he will fulfill the command of God as he is there to strengthen him. It is our duty to live in the spirit of the verse. As I am ordained by thee, O Rishikesh, seated in my heart, so I act. Jesus said, I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. We must live as God would have us live in his eternal life, to will what God will in the secret of divine life. When Jesus cried, may this cup pass from me, he was yet having his own preferences and asked the personal satisfaction. He wished to escape the bitter humiliation and death, but when he uttered, thy will be done, he gave up his separate existence and identified himself with the work of the Father who sent him. The evolution means a great shedding of all pretenses and evasions, a stripping of all sheaths, the self-knotting of the soul. Sanjay said, thus have I heard this wonderful dialogue between Vasudeva, Krishna and the high-souled Parth Arjun, causing my hair to stand on hand. By the grace of Vyas, I heard this supreme secret, this yoga taught by Krishna himself, the Lord of Yoga in person. Vyas granted to Sanjay the power to see and hear from a distance all the transpired on the battlefield, so that he might report the events to the blind king Dhritarashtra. O king, so I recall again and again this dialogue, wondrous and holy. O Keshav, Krishna and Arjun, I thrill with joy again and again. And as often I recall the most wondrous form of Hari Krishna, great is my astonishment, O king, and I thrill with joy again and again. So often as I recall the dialogue of Krishna and Arjuna and the fact of God are not philosophical propositions but are spiritual facts. We do not learn their meanings by simply recounting them, but by dwelling upon them in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, the Parth, the archer, I think there will surely be fortune, victory, welfare and morality. The teaching of the Gita is yoga and the teacher is Yogeshwar. When the human soul becomes enlightened and united with the divine, fortune and victory, welfare and morality are assumed. We are called upon to unite vision, yoga and energy and not allow the former to degenerate into madness or the latter into savagery. The great centralities of religion, the Baron von Hugel loved to call them the tremendous facts of life divine are yoga, the realization of God through worship and entire submission to His will, and dhanu or active participation in the furtherance of the cosmic plan. So spiritual vision and social service should go together. The double purpose of human life, personal perfection and his social efficiency, is indicated here when Plato prophesied that there would be no good government in the world until philosopher became king. He meant that human perfection was a sort of marriage between high thought and just action. This, according to Gita, must be forever the aim of man. This is the 18th chapter, the Yoga of Release, the Renunciation. Here the Bhagavad Gita Upanishad ends.